All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick, recording on Sunday evening. We're going to talk about week 2 of the NFL preseason, and then we're going to talk about comeback player of the year, which 2021 and 2022 with Joe Burrow and Geno Smith getting home was one of my favorite awards. And then last year was my least favorite award as Joe Flacco rinsed me. We have an element of, I believe the term is called pathetic fallacy going on, where it is a dark and stormy night in Stamford. So what better time to talk about comeback player of the year? For anyone unfamiliar with that term, it's when the setting imitates one's mood. So I'm looking forward to diving in to CPOY. But first, let's talk about the preseason, Drew. What was your big takeaway out of week 2 of the preseason in the NFL?
Well, I think maybe my favorite part of it was it really did feel like this is we're starting to get to dress rehearsal for NFL, preseason or regular season handicapping. We had one game on Thursday, sitting around wishing there was games on Friday. There weren't. And then, yes, action on Saturday and Sunday. And ultimately, RIP and peace to anyone who felt like the overs were finally going to come in, because they did not. And just in general, the backup quarterbacks, the backup units, and the vanilla scheme, I think, are largely to blame for a lot of this. But I'm excited because in general, I think that we are a little bit talent rich right now across the skill position groups. There are very few teams where I'm looking at, kind of team level ratings unit by unit and disappointed with what's going on at the skill position group. Even teams like the Giants and teams like the Patriots, who you would rate towards the bottom as you kind of look across who's available, like they have young players who are showing you some pop, which is exciting. And I hope that just in general, that married with, first string quarterback play and less vanilla scheme from some of the offensive coordinators leads to really entertaining football in the month of September. So I am cautiously optimistic that when things start counting, we're going to be treated to some pretty exciting stuff. Getting to see Mahomes, Josh Allen, some of the top tier quarterbacks in action this week was pretty cool. Just a great reminder of what is to come, which is I think going to be a pretty spectacular NFL season. So I don't know that there's much to take away in terms of huge swings in ratings across units, other than the handful of trades we've had, which I think if you were very, very cold on the Atlanta Falcons defense, you at least need to do a little bit of a break check there now that they have added Judon and Simmons, who are two bona fide blue chip players. And then similarly, I think it's easy to point at a team like the Vikings and say, oh, all these injuries. Well, yeah, we're not going to see JJ McCarthy this year. That stinks. But it does still feel like that's a very, very slept on team in terms of talent, particularly on the offensive side of the football. And now they add Stephon Gilmore to a unit that I thought desperately needed a little bit of kind of pop with that cornerback group, especially if you're going to run an aggressive defensive scheme like Flores wants to run, you need better coverage than the guys they had in that room. So ultimately, I'm very, very positive about where we're trending to start this NFL season. And I think everything we saw in the preseason games was kind of good signal that we're going to be treated to a good one.
Yeah, the Falcons are interesting because I think Simmons and Judon, clearly they're upgrades on what they had. I don't think Simmons is quite the guy he was a few years ago. I think he's lost the step, but he's still solid and better than what was there as the second safety alongside Jesse Bates, who's the superstar. With Judon, like the rest of Judon is like, he's very good, but he is more in the Montez Sweat type of mold than, your absolute superstar A graders, your Garretts, your Parsons, your Watts, etc. And I do worry a little bit still I worry a lot about the rest of the edge rush and the fact that the second best edge rusher on the Falcons, who are a minus 140 favorite to win their division, is like Lorenzo Carter, probably, which isn't ideal. But at least with Judon there, it gets a little bit less dire. I thought the big things out of the week 2 of the preseason was all the quarterback stuff. One, Gardner Minshew named the starter earlier Sunday, where it seemed to be trending that direction, I guess. I don't I don't really have a strong opinion. I don't think it really matters. I think that Minshew and Aiden O'Connell are kind of, in a way, totally different quarterbacks who get you to the same level of effectiveness, where O'Connell is going to be, I think, a little bit less boom or bust. Minshew, like, there's this idea that Minshew is like a game manager. Minshew does not manage any game. Minshew's out of his mind. Like, there are hugely high variance swings. It's the same way people talk about like Brock Purdy being a game manager. Brock Purdy's a gunslinger. He doesn't manage anything. And Minshew will have the absolutely perfect sideline passes to Devontae Adams, and then he'll get strip sacked by two guys at the same time that he somehow doesn't see in his peripheral vision. So I don't think that really changes too much. I thought it was concerning how bad the Giants offense looked with Daniel Jones.
Sure.
That was a bit of a red flag, though Malik Neighbors looked incredible. I thought it was a little bit of a red flag too that Caleb Williams, outside of that one highlight to Rome Odunze, didn't do much, and the Bears offense didn't do much against Texans second stringers. That's a little bit of a strange thing. And then we can get to Drake May in a second, but what did you make of the Bears, the Raiders, and the Giants?
The Daniel Jones early disastrous performance was concerning because the fear was being behind that offensive line, which was a disaster last year, combined with the ACL injury sustained, was that he was going to be playing a little bit scared. And like, he looked scared. He was, and like, I almost want to be like, okay, well, he got it out of his system. Like, he made some good throws after that early garbage he put on tape. And part of like the garbage on tape, by the way, like, guess who's really, really freaking good? Derek Stingley. Oh my goodness gracious, that guy is awesome. And like, I don't know why you were going at him, but fine, whatever. And so, there's a world where that was sort of Daniel Jones cleansing the demons to a degree, and that he will be a little bit more serviceable come the regular season. But there's also a world where, like, he'll never be mentally right considering what he went through last year and the PTSD that comes from playing behind that offensive line. So, there's real reason to be a cool on the Giants. But then again, like, they're the bottom power rated team in the NFC practically. So how much worse can it get, right, Jay? But I think ultimately, like, I still need to see him against kind of an average defense, and I think there could be something there. We'll have to keep our eyes open. The Raiders offense is a nightmare. It's going to be a nightmare all season. Buckle up. It's going to be a roller coaster all season. Buckle up, I guess. And ultimately, like, if that team's winning games, it's going to be because of their defense, not because of whatever Gardner Minshew brings to the table. But again, like, not surprised. Like, it seemed like that was where that decision was going to land, and kind of happy to be vindicated that is the direction that's going. And ultimately, like, the idea of the Raiders or anyone in the West challenging the Chiefs is kind of a laugh out loud sort of proposition. So don't know how much time there is worth spending on that. And your Caleb Williams point is, it echoed very, very close to home because I had a Bears bet on that game, and it was literally like, guys, like, what's going on here? Like, this is the B team of a bad defense. You're at home. Like, you're trying to kind of generate confidence with this young unit. What is happening? And it really did take some, kind of low probability stuff like the deep pass to Rome Odunze to kind of help get things going for that offense, which is a bad sign. And I know sharp people who have been kind of behind the scenes whispering, like, Waldron's not the guy. Waldron's not the guy. Do not get caught up in this. And a lot of what I saw, and it's impossible to really say how much do you weight what you saw scheme wise in a preseason game with what you're going to see in the regular season. But I think it's important to note that yes, it's possible that Williams does not light the world on fire out of the gate here, even though he starts out with a relatively soft schedule.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing to bet on, but there's probably a correlation, a little one, between the Seahawks being good and the Bears being bad, just if you want to fade Shane Waldron in general and just feel like, well, the offense will get better. I don't think that's necessarily fair, because I don't think like the Seahawks offense was doing anything seemingly, to my eye, anything, obscenely bad or anything. And they had a pretty progressive pass rate, and Waldron was there when with Geno playing the way that he did. So I'm sure it's probably okay, but who knows? And there's a lot of variance in that Bears offense, just with the fact that it is a new OC there with a rookie quarterback, and it's a completely new revamped skill position group. So there is, I think, a little bit of doubt as to how effective they're going to be immediately. I do think they're probably going to get saved a little bit, though, by the schedule to start the season. Let's close out this segment by talking about Drake Maye, who started the week off setting Twitter ablaze with a glorious incomplete pass and a little keeper touchdown, which, I think what may look like is, I mean, you can read into it what you want. He's going up against backups. His stat line wasn't very good. He looked better than his stats. But I think what was most relevant was Gerard Mayo's comments after the game, and I think the following day as well, where he said that the quarterback competition is not over. He was making comments about how all that Maye has left to do is like get into the huddle quicker and just get the whole operation running faster, which seems like an extremely easy box to tick if that's the last thing that he needs to do.
Yeah.
Now, the only so I have no doubt really that Maye is going to be the starter at some point, particularly because we have Jacoby Brissett behind a terrible offensive line with no threatening skill position players really. So I don't think it's going to work well for Jacoby. The only thing for me with Maye, and perhaps why he wouldn't be the week one starter, Patriots' first 4 weeks at Cincinnati, home Seattle, at the Jets, at San Francisco. Like, that is a murderer's row to start between, likely getting poleaxed by the Bengals and then I think going up against 3 tough defenses and certainly, tough pass rushes in New York and San Francisco. We'll see what the Seattle defense is. I know you and I are pretty high on them. We still have to see it in effect. So what do you think? What do you think the likelihood that Maye is A, the starter week 1, and then B, is the starter by week 5?
I would have said like 1% a week ago. I would say like 50% now.
Yeah.
And it's not even really that Maye showed me anything that he's ready to go. It's that Brissett does not look like he's capable of doing the job. And here, let's have a real honest conversation about this. Why would you start Brissett? You are hoping to have more competent quarterback play so that you can develop your young pieces on the offensive line and you can develop your young weapons so that when Maye is ready to take over, you have a better supporting cast. That is why you would start Brissett. Nothing that I saw with Brissett starting that game against the Eagles suggested that that will be likely. So if you're not going to get the benefit of developing the other young players on that offense, then there's really no reason to delay just getting Drake Maye's feet wet, other than in the back of your mind risk that if you put him out there behind an offensive line that can't perform the bare minimum job of protecting his blind side, then you risk getting him hurt and missing out on hugely valuable development time, or you risk Daniel Jonesing him, which is to say, like, having it be such a disastrous situation that he just can't kind of learn and grow at the position because all he's thinking about is where the next hit is coming from and how bad it's going to be. So it's going to be a very, very tough decision, I think, because the best long-term for this coaching staff, for this front office, the best possible thing is to get Maye out there with a supporting cast that can, help his development. And the sooner that happens, the better for everyone involved. And my guess is that right now, if you're not going to get growth out of the ancillary pieces because Jacoby Brissett is mismanaging the offense, then there's no reason to have him out there. So it's the schedule and the opponents I'm less, kind of conscientious about. You mentioned the Seahawks and their defense week 2. Like, that is going to be really hard for any young player to solve. A defense that has that much just in general, that much misdirection and that much obfuscation of, where everybody is on the field is going to be tough for any young player. And so if you want to hold him out until you get past the Jets, who, is, again, like, you don't want to necessarily set a precedent where for the rest of Maye's life, 2 times a year, he has to face a defense that the first time, one of his first games he remembers, he just got absolutely wiped out by one of the best in the NFL. And, the Niners, the Jets, and the Bengals games are all fascinating to me because they're road games. and the Patriots are outside a touchdown in all 3 of those games, almost certainly. And if their defense does what we think they can do and plays to an above average level, and the offense and Drake Maye have any type of a pulse in those games, then the Patriots are an intriguing cover. Particularly against the likes of the Bengals, where I personally right now the Bengals is bottom 8 defense in the NFL. Like that's a nice kind of opening opportunity to bet on the Patriots to cover a big number. As you get kind of through the middle portion of their schedule, there's no good place to insert him. So they may ultimately just decide, let's just go for broke and start in week 1. Again, like I've moved from 1% chance that happens to 50% chance just based on what I'm seeing from Jacoby Brissett and the fact that he may be ultimately not capable in his current state to do anything to help the Patriots generate some offensive production. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a logical fallacy with the discourse around Maye and when he gets inserted, because the idea of why you wouldn't insert him is that he's going to get killed with having the worst tackle situation in the NFL. But it's like there's also the acceptance that he's going to come in at some point this year. It's like the tackles are still going to be there.
They're still going to be there.
Nothing's going to change. Like is he going to get that much better at avoiding hits while being on the sidelines and taking second team reps at practice? I don't think so. Like, does it really change that much? And also, like Jacoby Brissett, like you get hurt in the first game, and then Drake Maye is just in there, and then your plans have gone out the window. So I think as well, even though it's a brutal first month, like the Bengals defense, not scary to your point. Yes, Seattle's defense is going to be confusing, but I don't think you're avoiding putting your rookie quarterback out there because you're scared that he's going to get killed by Jaron Reed and Uchenna Nwosu. Like, I think that from a pass rush perspective,
Byron Murphy looking pretty good.
Well, Byron Murphy's been ragged. He's been ragdolling Chargers third stringers.
That's true. That's fair.
Yeah, but look, I think Seattle's going to have a really good defense. But at the same time, like the Patriots have a brutal schedule all year. Like that's the nature of playing in the AFC East and being the worst team in the AFC East by margin.
Let's also pretend the Patriots aren't going to be picking through the Chargers third stringers to find a starting tackle. It's not crazy. I don't
understand how they've just accepted this situation. Like, surely there was something to do in free agency to not have to start Vidarian Lowe, whose work I'm not overly familiar with outside of being the 79th ranked tackle by PFF grade last year out of 81 qualifiers, and he was 81 out of 81 for pass block grade. And then 70th out of 79 for run block grade. It's not great to be protecting your franchise quarterback's blind side, but that's what they got to deal with. And I think that certainly from a watchability perspective and just having any interest in the Patriots whatsoever on offense, so I think the defense will be solid enough. But I would like to see Drake Maye in there.
I will say this: the one thing where we haven't mentioned, the in particularly related to the pass rush spookiness in the tackle situation, Drake Maye's delivery is too damn slow. He needs to get that thing fixed. And the idea of, I don't know, a prop like a strip sack, fumble 6 every game until they either solve the tackle problem or Drake Maye fixes his timing. I will that it feels like there will be a lot of opportunities for defenses to score against this Patriots team in that regard until that gets solved.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be perfect from the get-go by any means. All right. The RotoWorld Fantasy Football Draft Guide is now available exclusively through a new partnership with Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. Get a Fantasy Life Plus subscription and receive the RotoWorld Draft Guide plus fantasy DFS and betting tools to help you dominate all season long. Use promo code ROTO10 for 10% off. Go to fantasylife.com/RotoWorld to learn more. All right. NFL Comeback Player of the Year. Kevin Martin, Houston Rockets jersey hanging behind me for the occasion for no reason whatsoever. We're going to break this up into 2 segments. We're going to talk about the favorites to start, and then after another break, we'll talk about the long shots, of which quite a few have won of late. Geno Smith, no, I got some 50-1 on him. Joe Flacco, I didn't get any at any price, but he was 250-1 in the market. And then Joe Burrow, I can't recall what price he was, but Dak Prescott was anchoring that market all season long. And even with like 3 weeks to go in the season, Burrow was plus 900. I do remember that. Don't remember how long he got out to. So this year, Joe Burrow, interestingly, and we'll get into it, he is among the top 2 favorites. He's plus 225 behind only Aaron Rodgers plus 175. Rodgers opened at like even money and has since, I think, sensibly drifted out a little bit. Kirk Cousins is plus 500. Anthony Richardson is plus 800. So of these guys, kind of break it up into 2 parts, and we'll start with Burrow and Richardson, and then we'll get into the Achilles guys. But with Burrow and Richardson, do you think that they are going to be viewed as candidates? Because one, Joe Burrow played 10 games last year, hurt his wrist. It wasn't like a career, it wasn't a super serious injury. I don't think like everyone expects that Burrow is just going to come back and be Joe Burrow. He won the award 2 years ago. It's just a little weird that he's just gonna win comeback player of the year after playing 10 games and having a fairly nondescript injury. And then Anthony Richardson has played like 3 snaps in the NFL. He's played like 4 games in the NFL, so he hasn't really established a level to come back from. And his precedent would actually be Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow won in his second year as well. But Burrow played like 10 games and was a rookie of the year candidate while he was playing his rookie year. And also Burrow was like the year that he won, played like the second, third best quarterback in the entire NFL and was on a Bengals team that was the best story in the league going down the stretch. They're like 250 to 1 to win the Super Bowl, and they end up making the Super Bowl, winning the division. They beat the Chiefs. Jamar Chase has 266 yards. And it was just such a massive hype train that everyone just kind of, from memory with that, it's not like people really compared like his Burrow's comeback story to his Dak Prescott's gruesome injury comeback story. It was more like these guys are both candidates and Burrow's been better at football than Dak, so we're giving it to Burrow. And he only won like 28 to 22 in the vote count from memory. So what do you think about Burrow and Richardson? Do you think they're actually candidates?
No, I don't. And I think particularly Burrow, because honestly, if he has a standout season this year, we're talking about him for MVP. Nobody's putting him in the comeback player of the year category. Like, he's already a co-favorite for MVP. Like, anyone's going to be surprised if he lights the world on fire with what is one of the better offenses on paper coming into the season? No. And I think as I look at, really like last year's result, and I know you don't necessarily want to talk about this. I understand why, but it was an abomination. Like, it was an abomination that they gave the award to Flacco over Hamlin. And I think ultimately the fact that they had to make a specific declaration to the voters, hey, this is what you're voting on, that's all you need to know. Like, the people who award this, the people who give out this award were not happy with the fact that they gave it to Flacco last year, to the tune that they had to change the definition, or at least make sure people understood the definition. And I think as I try to figure out what happened last year beyond just the Flacco thing and the fact that the Browns got all of this credit, I look at sort of the way that the schedule broke, and that so many of the Week 17 games fell on New Year's Eve, that I think a lot of people kind of were very keyed in on the Thursday night standalone game, which was Browns Jets, and the Browns did great, and they solidified a playoff spot that was very improbable. And I think a lot of people who don't spend as much time as you and I thinking about these awards were like, oh, the Browns, I guess we got to give them some awards. And then they went on and did their New Year's Eve celebrations, didn't really kind of think very hard about the rest of their awards, and then just kind of Flacco. Wow, how about that? He took this. So the kind of the other key point is you bring up Joe Burrow's last award in this market, and it was very much the same. Like, Dak Prescott's comeback from the injury he had was much more impressive. But Joe Burrow did what he did in the most important game at the end of the season. Everybody was paying attention to it, and it flipped everybody's opinion. And this is just sort of something you have to get over if you're going to bet these markets, which is if there are singular, standalone, high-profile games at the end of the season that tend to really kind of resonate in the cultural like coverage of the sport, then players who do well in those games are going to reap the benefits of getting the credit when it comes to voting, particularly when it's not the MVP, when it's not the DPOY, when it's a award that is a little bit less carefully considered. And comeback player of the year is probably at the top of the mountain of people just aren't really giving this the type of thought and credit that our own great Peter King used to do, where he was literally like, it felt like he may have advocated even that this was an award in the first place, and would always think like, you know what? I can't believe Nick Gates played 17 games after that broken leg last year that was so violent. Like, he gets my award, right? Like that was sort of the way this was originally intended, and that's what they're trying to get back to. And so I almost think that like the handicap this year is probably just which player who ultimately plays and has a modicum of success across 17 games this year was the least likely, because the injury was so outrageous, is sort of the lens that I would look at this through. And for those reasons, this is Aaron Rodgers to lose. Like, the fact that went the way it went, and that he plays in the New York market, and if he takes the Jets to the playoffs this year, wild card or division. I mean, if it's division, then it's game over. If it's wild card, maybe there's still some window for someone else to get this. But it was something no one wanted to see. It is something that everybody talked about for the entire season because of his presence in, just in the zeitgeist in general. And it is going to be something that will be talked about throughout the Jets' success this year if they have it. And I think ultimately his price should be more like, I don't know, minus something, but you can't get that weird betting into these markets because, again, like, somebody could do something strange on December 28th when everybody's paying attention, and that guy could all of a sudden run away with the narrative, and everybody just checks that box, or at least gives him enough second place votes to get that award when the dust settles. And for those reasons, I'm not going to bet this market.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. I think the thing with last year, and I'm not sure there's that much to really take away from last year's result, because it was such a bizarre race that I don't think is ever really going to be repeated, where you have a guy who came back from the dead against a guy who got off his couch and played 5 games and was a Twitter sensation. But I think the thing is with last year, and it's probably been a little bit of revisionist history, like Flacco got 13 out of 50 first place votes. Hamlin got 21 out of 50. And those numbers are ironed into my head. Where my grave miscalculation was, and I think maybe what can be instructive going forward, is I just thought Baker Mayfield would get a lot more of the vote share than he did in the end, because I thought Baker Mayfield, in terms of everyone's argument against Hamlin, was, well, he hasn't performed on the field. Well, it's like, if you're comparing the top 3 candidates, the clear best performer of the 3 was Baker Mayfield. It wasn't even close. He's the only guy who played the full season. He played at a better level just per game than Flacco did in his 5 games. But people just didn't care, and the story just didn't resonate. And people just defaulted to, all right, well, I'm going to vote someone. Well, there was 13 people who voted Flacco. The other 37 were like, all right, I'm going to choose who my candidate is. And then, oh, yeah, Flacco's a good story, I'll put him second. And I just don't think, for the most part, in people's voting, and some people do give it a lot of thought, they give all their votes a lot of thought, but I think a lot of people, they just give a lot of thought to their first pick, and then their second or third, they kind of default to, the loudest selection or the loudest story. And I think that is largely what happened there. So I think it's instructive as well last year that, Tua Tagovailoa just got no buzz whatsoever, despite having, multiple concussions in his career, seemingly being under a little bit of threat. Matthew Stafford, who outperformed everyone, really, who was a candidate, except for one guy who I'll get to. Stafford missed like half the year before, and there was talks of him retiring. Then he leads a Rams team that was expected to win 5 games into the playoffs while playing at like a down ballot MVP level. No attention whatsoever. And I think that Burrow is going to be like Staffordy this year, where he's probably going to play better than everyone else. People just don't really think about him as a candidate because he's an MVP candidate, and Stafford no one really cared about because there wasn't like a loud injury that he had the year before. And like 2 years before that, he won the Super Bowl, and it was just kind of somewhat, I guess, vaguely expected, or not that big of a surprise or an amazing story, even though I think it was pretty good. So I think reading into all that and bringing it back to this year, and I agree with you with Rodgers. I think Rodgers should be the favorite. He has the best story. He plays in New York. They haven't made the playoffs in a million years. All of that, being 40 off the Achilles, insane moments last year when he goes down in the story. But my question to you would be, is there potentially some Dak versus Burrow aspect from a couple years ago where Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins have the exact same injury? Cousins got injured later in the season, which I don't really think is going to matter in the vote, whatever. And it's his plant leg, which is a harder injury than Rodgers, but that's not going to matter to people. But they have the same injury. If Cousins has better stats and is on a better team and he wins his division and Rodgers is like a 10-7 wild card and is like a game manager, and Cousins has the Penix thing now, which gives him more narrative, people like Kirk Cousins more than Aaron Rodgers for the most part. I think with the Netflix doc, and some people just don't like Aaron Rodgers, which a lot of people just don't like Aaron Rodgers. Do you think that they will get stacked up and be like, this quarterback was better than this other quarterback who had the exact same injury? Or are people just going to be like, the Rodgers story is better, I'm just voting for him?
New York, I think, is the difference maker in how it gets told. If the Jets are relevant, then throw everything. The idea of an Atlanta narrative breaking through a New York narrative, just I'm not here for that. I think ultimately the one of the things that hurt Baker Mayfield last year, for instance, he won his division, Jay, but he won it kind of by default because everybody knew that the NFC South was pretty bad, and he lost his Week 17 game, so it was easy to sort of be like, I guess he's gonna win the South, but this Bucs team, I don't know. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for Atlanta to fall exactly into that mold this year. And there's also plenty of scope for Atlanta not to win the South. I think, obviously, the Jets could very, very easily, lose to the Bills when it comes to, getting the division title. But they have a good enough defense that regardless of Rodgers' individual performance, I think they're going to be in the mix for a wild card spot and a playoff spot in the AFC, even though it's more crowded. Atlanta still has a lot of questions to answer. There are a lot of things that I'm, still very much not sold on about the Falcons. And I think, your points, which I take very, very seriously, which the voters probably aren't, I'm going to be less surprised if Aaron Rodgers looks good than I'm going to be if Kirk Cousins looks good, because Kirk Cousins was the plant leg, and that does matter. And it was later, and that does matter. And I think it is still, there's more to prove that Kirk Cousins can even do a full season of what we saw him do for 6 games last year than Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is going to the Hall of Fame. He doesn't throw picks. He operates a very efficient offense. And in general, he's going to be running an offense that is leaning heavily into the run game with a very decent run blocking offensive line now. They're going to be fine. And so I don't know that I have tons of questions about exactly how the Jets, offensive efficiency could penalize him. Whereas I look at the range of outcomes for the Falcons offense, and it's still a big unknown. The coaching staff there has not won me over. The general manager and just the vision and the team building looks like they don't know what the heck they're doing with the way that they conducted the free agency draft. And now all of these desperation moves at the end of, in the middle of camp, all of it screams like there's not necessarily a cohesive, kind of team building effort going on there. And even if they do ultimately, let's say they win double-digit games in Atlanta this year and run away with the NFC South, he still has to break through Aaron Rodgers being the Jets quarterback, which people are going to be quite excited about if he is able to play all 17 games.
Yeah. I think just the central weirdness in this market is we have 2 guys who play the same position, who have who have the same injury to different legs, but they have the same injury. And one guy, Kirk Cousins, is projected to have a better statistical season than Aaron Rodgers because he gets to play in the dome, he gets the easier schedule, all of that. And Rodgers is half of Cousins' price, because the projection is, and I'm not saying it's necessarily unreasonable, but the projection is that his story is just going to resonate a lot more. And I think that is enough to rightfully make him a slight favorite over Cousins. I can't get to him being, half of Cousins' price, just because I think there is a chance, and it's just the degree of how big of a chance, which shapes how much of a bet Cousins is. But there is a chance we get to the end of the season and people are just like, they had the same injury and Cousins had the better season. I'm voting for Cousins. And I think the Penix thing really helps Cousins because it gives him some narrative as well to push back. So I don't know. I feel like I'm going to be on Kirk Cousins, and Aaron Rodgers can be my Joe Flacco round 2. It's all right. I'm ready to get hurt again. I'm not going all in Cousins or anything yet, but that's
I'm
I feel
not.
like
I'm not.
in that direction.
I'm not going to twist your arm, but the schedule is funky because the Falcons play very few high profile, high leverage games. Like their schedule is very soft. And I know that should presumably help from a statistical profile standpoint for Kirk. But the front half of this season, like Aaron Rodgers is going to be in your face all the time. He's in prime time over and over. Standalone, prime time, standalone. And then he's getting daily hits on Pat McAfee to top it all off. It's like not daily hits, but weekly hits. And so like the idea of like just anyone who's kind of covering the football zeitgeist, like even if the Falcons are in the mix for a playoff spot, Cousins could be forgotten and Aaron Rodgers is going to be ever present in my opinion. So it just kind of, and if you're a Rodgers hater, like put it aside, put it on the shelf, set it aside this year. Like you're not going to enjoy football and you're not going to enjoy this 2024 season unless you can divorce your personal feelings about Aaron Rodgers from what's going to happen, because again, he's going to be in your face week in, week out.
Okay. Last thing before we hit our last promo. We know that momentum and how you finish matters in this award. It's clearly how Flacco won. It's how Joe Burrow beat Dak Prescott. Kind of how Geno won, even though he faltered in the second half of the season, but still made the playoffs in the final week. And the other guys, Saquon, CMC, didn't do enough to take it from him. Here's how Rodgers closes the season after his bye week in week 12. Seattle, at Miami, at Jacksonville, Rams, the pivotal week 17, which decided this award last year, at Buffalo, and then home to Miami. Here's how Atlanta closed their season after they have a bye week in week 12 too. Home Chargers, at Minnesota, at Vegas on Monday Night Football, home Giants, at Washington, home Carolina. So while Aaron Rodgers is getting stomped by Josh Allen in week 17, my boy Kirk Cousins is going to be putting Dan Quinn to the sword in Washington. So just get ready for that.
You know what? You just reeled off a whole bunch of really good D lines. He better have his mobility. He better have some good interior protection. Even the Commanders, they got Payne and Allen in that interior. There's some pass rush, albeit some bad teams. I'll admit.
Yeah, I don't love the Falcons. I don't love this Falcons team. I don't really. There's something honestly, wrong. Something iffy about it.
Something stinks. I'm with you 100%. And maybe that is coloring my opinion too much. And if it is, then. Yeah. I'm not betting this market anyway, so
I'm going to bet it. I'm going to bet it even more than last year. It's my comeback season for comeback player of the year. Yeah, comeback player of the year, Jay Croucher, 5,000 to 1. All right, this Thursday we are hosting our annual RotoWorld Draft Marathon, including the unveiling of Matthew Berry's Ride or Die on Fantasy Football Happy Hour. That's right, 10 hours of nonstop draft prep beginning at 11 a.m. Eastern on August 22nd. Check out NBCsports.com/draft marathon for the full schedule.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Ooh,
Okay, we are
$100.
back.
All right.
Yep, there we go. All right, comeback player of the year. Long shots, Drew, to get out of here. As you mentioned at the top of the show, long shots have had a tendency to win this award of late. So some of the most notable ones: Nicholas Chubb is 12-1. Daniel Jones was drifted after his performance in the preseason. He is 20-1. J.K. Dobbins also 20-1. The big firmer has been Sam Darnold post J.J. McCarthy injury. Let's just pause there for a minute. I don't think Sam Darnold can win the award because of what they did to change the criteria to now you have to be, it's clarified that the spirit of the award is that you're coming off an injury or an illness or something that caused you to miss time the previous season. Sam Darnold did not suffer an injury last year to keep him off the field. So unless people are just going to completely disregard the criteria, and to be clear, last year, there was apparently no formal criteria given to voters. So I just don't think Darnold can win. Kyler Murray is 25-1, Justin Herbert 30-1. Maybe my favorite one to talk about, or least favorite, however we want to talk. Deshaun Watson is 35-1. Tank Dell 40-1, and then you get a load of defensive players. And after betting on Nick Bosa at 200-1 the year that he had 16 sacks off a torn ACL in week 2 the year prior and was basically like the 4th best defensive player in football and did not sniff the award, I'm off voting defensive players in a year when you have like a lot of quarterback and high profile players. So yeah, there are worlds where, I don't know, if like Jalen Phillips off a torn Achilles is like your sack title leader, then maybe he could win comeback player of the year, but you're probably better off just betting him to win the sack title, honestly, at that point. So who of these names jumps out to you the most?
Wow. I agree 100% with your Darnold commentary, which is, again, like you're literally going to need the voters to thumb their nose, at the criteria that they were given. Be like, no, we're going to give it to a guy who's the most improved because that's what we want this award to be. And in that world, sure, Darnold could be the discussion, but I don't think that's very, very likely at all. And again, it's way too crowded of a market. And if you honestly think Sam Darnold is going to be great, guess what? You could put that opinion to work in lots of markets for the Vikings to do good things this year. And I would much rather have that than I would have, Darnold comeback player of the year. So yeah, I mean, of the guys you said, clearly Nick Chubb is the guy that deserves kind of conversation as the tier B leader after your top 2 quarterbacks. I mean, again, like I don't consider Richardson and Burrow realistic considerations. I actually don't think Kyler Murray is a very realistic consideration because he finished the season, kind of building into his comeback.
Well,
and
let's
so
pause there for a sec because I want to pinpoint that. And I don't know what is going to happen here, and you might be right. His season this year is kind of being talked about. Like he came back last year, but like it was for an Arizona team that was out of contention and no one really paid any attention to them. This is being billed as the comeback season for Kyler Murray. At the same time, he got hurt 2 years ago. So do you think that it's going to be something where people are like, no, this is the comeback season, and he does technically meet the definition because he did have an injury which caused him to miss the time last year? Or is he just not a candidate?
I think he's not a candidate.
Okay. I kind of think he is, but I'm not 100% convinced of it. So yeah, I'm not sure how that one's going to break.
Again, like it's impossible for me to really kind of it's impossible for me to put myself in the mindset of the voters for this award because it's so random. But I will say that the time proximity between when he was actually hurt and the fact that he finished last season and was performing at a high level, to me is enough to say that there will be a large enough portion of the block that just leaves him off, even if he is, kind of being talked about in that regard. And I guess like that's maybe the other key point here, which is that your Stafford commentary was very valuable. And yes, he was, I am, by the way, I'm against the Rams this year because I am still like, if you were that close to retiring then and something happens to you this year, who's to say Stafford is not just, okay, peace. But the fact that there was no marketing push, there was no like effort to really kind of make it a thing. Like, yeah, I mean, if the Arizona Cardinals have used every opportunity they have and every PR kind of button they could press to make people like talk about the Kyler Murray comeback he's having this year, then yeah, it's going to get into the zeitgeist. But I personally think it's been way too long since he was injured to expect there's going to be a big run here. So yeah, for me, Chubb at the top of tier 2, and then I would put guys like J.K. Dobbins in the mix. It seems like he's going to get a pretty healthy share of the opportunities in L.A., at least especially with Gus Edwards a little bit banged up here, and he apparently looks good, which I can't believe because he looked so bad off of the original injury that he had. But yeah, I mean, I think those are the two guys that I would key on because again, like a lot of the voters play fantasy football. If Chubb or Dobbins wins you a fantasy football championship because he goes off week 16 and 17, does he by default then get the comeback player of the year award? That could very well see it. Like there is absolutely scope for that. So, I think I would mostly be keying on running backs after kind of giving careful consideration to Rodgers and Cousins.
Yeah, I think there are worlds where Dobbins could win. I think he's an uphill battle to fight, and he's going to have a monstrous season. But he has had tortured injury history. I think he would be more a candidate in weaker years, but he could do it. I think Chubb is going to be the guy that everyone wants to vote for because he had the most gruesome injury, the only real injury of the top candidates that seemed like it was career threatening. The Browns are already doing PR behind the Nick Chubb comeback story. It's just whether, one, he can get on the field soon enough. It doesn't look like he's going to play to start the season. And then whether he can actually have the production. Like Nick Chubb coming back and having like 925 rushing yards, I don't think it's going to do it in this quarterback field. If he comes back and he's Nick Chubb and he's like, a 1K rusher and looks like he's a top 5 running back again, then I absolutely think that he can win. And people... Again, it just comes back to people are going to want to vote for him if he has a case. And the last thing I'll sign off on, kind of for stretches thought, are there worlds where Deshaun Watson can win this award? Because if you just look at it from a purely football perspective, like he fits the mold of someone who can win. I just think there's too much wiggle room with the subjectivity of the award that people just won't allow themselves to vote for him so it'll just take like one person being like, what's he actually coming back from? Oh, he's coming back from that. Cannot give him the comeback player of the year award at the NFL honors. I just can't really see it happening.
No, I agree with that 100%. And I think, again, like you don't think Chubb could get off his couch? He'd eat Thanksgiving dinner with his family and then get off the couch and join the Browns for the final 5 weeks, win some folks their fantasy football championships, and then all of a sudden he's your comeback player of the year. Like, yeah, very well could happen. Like, possibly. honestly, like if one of the running backs pops weeks 14 through 17, then like they're in the mix.
Yeah, I think Chubb is clearly the best candidate on that front. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.